So, like a lot of you guys, I daily drive a 2500 HD. Mine's a Duramax 2008 model. It's pretty uncomfortable. The thing is sprung really stiff because it's designed to carry a pretty heavy load. Myself, I don't really tow that much. In fact, in the 10 months that I've owned the truck, I've only actually had a trailer on it once. So I really don't need the extra towing capacity that comes with that really stiff ride. So today, we're gonna do something about that, and that involves working with the rear leaf springs. This 2008 Silverado is powered by the LMN Duramax, and the truck has already been lowered 3 inches in the rear by installing a drop shackle. Now, the best part about what we're going to do today is, well, everything is free, so it's not going to cost a penny. The first step, as always when working with suspension, is to get the truck up in the air and get the tires off the truck. But of course, don't forget the jack stands, because the last thing that you need is a 6,500-pound truck falling on your head. That would be a little bit of a headache. On a 2500 HD like this, there are actually 4 main leafs plus the thick overload, which comes into play when there's a lot of cargo in the bed of the truck. Now, like I said earlier, I don't really haul a whole bunch of stuff with this truck, and my main objective today is to make the truck ride a lot smoother. Now, the nice thing about a leaf spring pack like this is you can actually modify its spring rate by adding or subtracting individual leaves. A half-ton truck in this same year would have only had 2 main leafs plus the overload. So I'm not going to take out 2, I'm actually only going to take out 1, which is the third one down, and as well as that, I'm going to take out the overload spring. The axle is held to the spring pack with 2 U-bolts and 4 nuts. Depending on who you ask, you'll get different opinions about whether or not you should actually reuse the U-bolts. Now, if you have any worries about it, just go pick up some new ones. Any sort of a spring in an automotive suspension system has the ability to store a lot of energy, and that could cause injury. So anytime I'm working with leaf springs, I like to take 2 large C-clamps and basically just clamp the pack together while I unscrew the nut that's on the center pin. Then, once I have the pin out, I can slowly release tension on the C-clamps and safely separate all the individual leaves that are held together in the pack. Then it's just a simple matter of pulling the leaves apart and removing the one that I'm not going to reuse. By removing the main overload leaf spring and the third one from the top, I am going to be sacrificing some load carrying capability. But like I said, that's a sacrifice that I'm willing to make because I really don't ever tow, especially something that heavy with this truck. Primarily, I'm just driving back and forth on backcountry roads to get to my work and to my house. And where I live, there are a lot of very rough roads. Now, if I ever wanted to regain some of that towing capacity, well, it's simple. I could either just put the thing back together, which is a little bit of a pain in the butt, or I could just install some sort of a helper bag that uses air springs to hold up the rear end of the truck. So one thing you can see here is that the original center bolt, the threads don't go all the way down. Now, you can get new ones of these, but you're gonna have the same problem with the U-bolts. The U-bolts that go around the spring pack, the original threads won't go all the way. So instead of buying new U-bolts and a new center bolt, what I did is I took an old overload leaf spring and I cut it down. I'm basically going to use that as a spacer. That'll take up that extra thickness and let me use the original hardware. This is actually the second time I'm attempting this modification. On the first go around, I took off only the main overload leaf spring on the bottom, and I took it out and I drove it, and basically I didn't notice anything. It still rode, to me, just as rough as it did with the overload as it did without. So this time around, I'm removing both the overload and one of the leaf springs to try to get it to mimic more of a half-ton style stock suspension. From this point forward, it's just a simple case of installation being the direct reverse of the disassembly. You probably noticed the extra part that I'm installing below the U-bolt mount, and that has to do with the traction bar setup that I'll be installing just a little bit later on. When you're tightening down the U-bolts, always make sure to use a crisscross pattern to make sure everything tightens up evenly. I am using an impact, but I will tighten them by hand just a little bit later on. Whenever you accelerate, the pinion gear is climbing up the ring gear. This creates a twisting motion against the leaf springs. Especially since we've taken out extra springs from the pack, this could actually lead to driveline damage. So we install a long bar with rod ends on either side that attach to the frame and to the axle. This will help counteract some of that torque. Once you get the hardware in, I like to apply about a turn and a half of preload to keep everything locked down. A long bar like this will prevent wheel hop, and it does a very good job of it. But if you did a lot of drag racing and you want to plant those rear tires, you may want to consider installing a pair of Caltracs. The great thing about the front suspension on these 2500 HDs is there's some built-in adjustment on the torsion bars. All you have to do is tighten the bolt to raise the front end, or in my case, loosen the bolt to lower it. I'm going to start by removing 3.5 full turns from each side, and hopefully that gets me right where I want to be. Out back, we have a fender height of 38.5 inches, and on the front, we have a fender height of 38. This gives it about a 1/2 inch rake lower in the front, which looks pretty good on these trucks. All in, including the rear drop shackle and the torsion bar adjustments up front and the missing leaf springs, were about 4.5 inches lower than a stock truck out back and about 3 to 3.5 inches lower up front. And that's almost maxed out on the torsion bar adjustment. So if I want to go any lower, I'll have to get a drop key or a drop spindle up front, and out back, have to get a hanger or a flip kit. I did have to put on a lower shock, but only on the driver's side because GM actually kind of staggers the lengths of the shock. Also, I had to cut the factory bump stops in half so it wouldn't be sitting right on the axle tube. I have to say I am really impressed with the smoothness of the ride in this truck now. It didn't cost me anything, just pulling out a couple of leaf springs, and it's taken a ton of the harshness out that you get when you're driving over these broken up back roads. Now, I will say I did notice a little bit of an odd floaty feeling from the rear of the truck now, but that probably has something to do with the fact that I have a high mileage stock shock on one side and an aftermarket drop shock on the other. Now, that could probably be cured with a really good set of aftermarket high quality shocks, but for the money, I am very impressed with what we've done today.